Welcome. Hey, everybody. Hope all's well. Hope all well's with everybody. Hope you're doing good. So, any questions about your practice? About your meditation practice?
Sometimes I question as I'm investigating something if am I present with it, or have I gone off into just wandering off into a
Good.
story?
Good.
And so I'm
Good.
looking for things to ask myself to make sure that I'm still in very present moment.
I find that more of a comment than a question. I think you already got the answer. Just always, you really want to, understand that you want the mindfulness to be there. Because, if you look at mindfulness, right, attention and awareness, right? Metacognitive awareness, right? And with that itself, as we keep on coming back to, the object, you get distracted, you keep on coming back to the object, the mind, because the mind starts to become lighter, more buoyant, more you start to let go of things naturally, then this investigative factor begins to develop by itself. Now that's one question. Another question is sometimes you just use the mind perhaps to explore sensation. Take maybe the area around the sensation or within the sensation or beneath the sensation or around the sensation. This is the physicality part of it. Or like let's suppose like some hindrances occurring, right? Like desire or aversion, right? Or restlessness or dullness or doubt, right? Then what's the physical piece of that, right? Or what's the narrative like? Right? These are different ways to kind of investigate what's happening with this particular, or what's the condition of the mind. What's the mind like at this point? So like let's suppose that like you're wanting, right? So the mind's going to be like, like this is going to be this kind of like contraction around wanting, right? The mind's going to be like that, right? So like with the Satipatthana that we've been studying, what's happening in the body, what's happening with feeling tone, what's the condition with the mind, and what particular mental object or Dhamma is operating. That's a great kind of way to do that kind of investigation piece. Does anybody else have a response for that? It's a great question because sometimes the thing I like about the question is sometimes that we start to strive, when we start to investigate, and I don't think that's really necessary. I think it's just necessary to like just observe different aspects of the experience.
I have a question on top of the question. I really love that. And sometimes when I'm investigating, and I realize I've gotten off track, and it might have just been something just from a few minutes ago before we started meditating, or something I'm going to do when I get home. And then I'll contemplate the thought was unpleasant or pleasant, but not necessarily a feeling. And then I'm thinking, like, is that even real? Is that even can you have an unpleasant thought? But I do think I'm getting more skilled at seeing if something is aversion or craving.
Yeah, probably. My thinking is on that is that if a thought is unpleasant, right, it's probably going to manifest as unpleasant feeling. It's just the mind's not noticing it, right?
Yeah, I
So
guess
you
so.
just
Yeah,
have to
you're
kind of
right.
go into the body
Yeah.
because of all the conditioning factors that are hard to not act out on as feeling.
Yeah.
It's almost like there's no way we're going to like subjugate feeling. I don't think we are. I think it's always every moment experience is kind of feeling tone. It's just the mind isn't just subtle, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
Sooner or later you'll have an unpleasant thought, right? Some type of I'm judging obnoxious thought, right? And then you'll see the body, and there's some type of feeling tone in the body, right? And sometimes it may not be associated with the thought, but it will become clearer that remember that thought is one of the sense contacts, right? Thought it's contact. It's one of the contacts along with seeing, smelling, tasting, touching, and hearing, right? That's one of them in Buddhist psychology. That's one of them. So it's going to give a feeling tone. Now it may be neutral. It could be neutral. Neither one. It's not discernible. But
You can have a negative thought and a neutral feeling.
I don't really know the answer to that question. Anybody ever had that experience?
A negative thought, a neutral. I don't know.
I know,
Deleting,
like,
I suppose.
I used to have a negative thought about feeling hungry, and upon investigation, I actually find it pleasant.
Yeah.
The
Nice.
sensation of it bubbling in my belly is actually pleasant. So you can kind of have a shift in
Yeah.
because of investigation.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm
and-
leaning towards what you said, that I'm probably not aware of the feeling yet.
Yeah, probably. And I want to piggyback on that. You know, it's like, you know, initially when you're hungry and there was aversion, that's like the reactivity. That's the suffering piece. And once you start investigating it, what you're doing is you're letting go of the suffering piece.
Mm. Mm.
This is why investigation.
And
So
the conditioning that means.
that's
gotta
right.
do something.
Yeah, and that is suffering, because when we react to conditioning, that is suffering, right? Yeah, and so the tag-along comment to the tag-along comment is that, you know, like all of us in this room, we all are reacted to feeling tone. I mean, that's the open gate that the Buddha talks about. The easiest place for you to interrupt this samsara, the cycle of suffering, is through feeling tone. Because that's what we react to. We react to feeling tone, right? Everybody knows that one, right? We're pretty much there. If you don't know it, you'll pick up on it. Feeling tone, if you're not used to this, if you don't understand what this means, in Buddhist practice, we're not talking about emotionality, right? Like anxiety or anger or discouragement, any of these emotions, right? We're talking that every experience, any contact with sense information, right? Through seeing, smelling, tasting, hearing, touch, and thinking. I'm laughing because I always mess this up, and what I do is I go down through my head and I say, I'm gonna get them right. I'm gonna get them right. So I'm striving to get it right. And so I'm laughing at myself, right? And so anytime we have contact, right, there's going to be feeling tone, pleasant, unpleasant, or right in between. It's not a one. And then typically the conditioning is to react to that, and that's the weak link in the chain for us to stop this reactive energy around emotions and volitional energy, this push out of old emotional pain or new emotional pain. Is that all right? So so a quote for you is that in business as well as everything else, you're in business to spread love. Your agency should spread love. Your screenplay should spread love. Your store should spread love. Your life should spread love. The key to successful career is realizing it's not separate from the rest of your life, but is rather an extension of your most basic self, and your most basic self is love. This is somebody that some of y'all are familiar with, Marianne Williamson. You know Marianne Williamson? Who she is? Marianne Williamson is a Course in Miracles teacher, and she actually ran for president. Some of us were hoping that she'd do really well, you know. And I think she actually did pretty well, considering, given her, you know, probably lack of political.
She made it to the stage.
When was
Yeah,
that?
she made it to the stage, you know. So
What
you know,
year was that?
was that?
Last time,
She's
yeah.
running
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, she's running again.
How about that? Yeah, she's A Return to Love is a great book. All of her books are really good.
No, I read the actual book. I've never read it. I've never even heard of her.
Oh.
A Course in
Yeah.
Miracles.
A Return to Love is really, like, I used to have the tapes when they were on cassette.
Very old.
2018.
So, you know, resources for tonight. You know, Joseph has some podcast on the Noble Eightfold Path. I've been telling y'all that if you go to Access to Insights, a very nice long article on the Noble Eightfold Path. Gunnar Antana has a book called The 8 Steps to Mindful Happiness, and Peter Carlson. Those are usually my resources for talk. So, you know, this practice, like we said in the guided meditation is about mental purification. And, you know, what we're here to do is to abstain from things that are painful, you know, things that are destructive. And this meditation practice is about, you know, going deeper into karmic formations. In other words, you know, pain from the past, you know, things that have stored up over time, and investigating and letting them go. And so the reason we formally sit is because this stuff starts to bubble up given the right conditions. And so this Noble Eightfold Path that we're talking about, has 3 parts to it. There's a spirituality path or virtue path, and that's what we're talking about right now. There's this wisdom aspect to it, and there's also this concentration part. And the Pali words for this are Shila or morality. I like talking about it as spiritual. And then there's this concentration piece or samadhi, and then there's this wisdom piece or panya. And they're mutually interacting. They all support each other, as we'll talk about tonight. And they're all necessary. All parts of the path are necessary to progress. So that's what we're doing right now. So we've been studying this. We studied the wisdom part, view and intention. And I talked about view during the guided meditation. The more you start to touch experience, we talked about this last night in the group. The more you touch experience, the more you befriend experience, you're getting some glimpses of non-duality, that everything is interdependent. Okay, and then in this intention to abstain from harm, right, and to activate into connection, right, loving kindness, compassion, and renunciation, letting go of the parts of the self that are essentially cause a sense of a separate self. All right, that's what we're here to do. So. That's where we are, is into this kind of spiritual piece. So, last week we were talking about right speech, wise speech, right? And we had this exercise that we did, and we all kind of are on the same page with this. Everybody that was here was on the same page, and we all talked about how speech, the speech that we deliver, need be honest and beneficial, and then also kind, right? I just wanted to say a couple things, right, about that. Okay, I put some screen shares up there. A couple other things that did not get mentioned. All right. One is that another aspect of being untruthful, being dishonest, is exaggerating. Exaggerating your experience, right? It happens in here, right? I saw white lights. I was concentration for 20 minutes. People exaggerate their meditation practice. It happens, right? We exaggerate. It's just a sense of self, right? We want to make ourselves bigger than we really are, right? There's that, right? Another thing too is gossip. The gossip is really painful. Everybody in here knows it, but we all kind of do it, right? We all say, "Oh, this person here, this person there, I can't believe this. They're like this and all this." I'm really careful about this. And last time too, right? I made this point about is the speech beneficial or not, right? And so, you will find that if you pull the reins back on your speech, right, and you might have a little bit more practice to practice mindfulness and loving kindness. And you folks that were on the retreat that practiced that presence exercise, where you were to be present for the person speaking, you were in the role of the listener. And when you're in the role of the listener, you were able to have the intention of metta towards the person that was talking. So there's so much benefit to checking our urgency to speak. So much benefit with that.
Yeah. Just had to say that.
It's urgent.
Y'all funny. And then, this urgency to speak, and goodness, probably there's a good chance that some of you in this room have known for a long time, okay? I certainly have for a long time. It might be happening right now. I've known for a long time, and some of you have, that the urgency to speak, there's so much I in that, so much me in that. Do you know what I'm talking about? Yeah, it's oh my goodness, right? And it's a great education, how this self is so important. We have so much investment in the sense of self, right? And a lot of it comes out with speech. Is this it, right? Is this your experience? Is this your experience? Yeah, good. Well, maybe not great, but nevertheless, I'm glad that you have that insight.
Can I just really quick?
Absolutely.
There's moments in your life when something just happens and then it's there forever. It was fired and wired. And I was in third grade. It was probably the first week of class in third grade, and Miss Rosenfeld. And I was immature emotionally, I suppose, and we were sitting in a big circle, and she said something, and I know I got real excited, kind of like my little dog. And I probably blurted out something excited, but unfiltered. And she looked at me, and she said, "Can I stay after class?" And I went, "Oh!" She was so kind. And after class, she said something like, not can you tone it down, but do you, are you aware that you're being a little disruptive with your reaction? It was so kind and so helpful, because like right now, that story just comes right back to me where she helped me. It was that urgency. I just had no, like my little dog just lurching.
This is such a powerful comment. I mean, it just helps me so much with that, because if you look at all this, like speech, action, livelihood, okay, these are like the spiritual components of the Noble Eightfold Path. It's all about kindness, and it's all about interconnection. It's not, despite our religious conditioning, it's not about don't do this, don't do that. It's about we want to create a better place on the planet for everybody. There's a lot of responsibility, not that you have to be burdened by it, but there's a tremendous amount of responsibility that probably everybody in this room is willing to take on to make this world a better place by being kind in our speech. I mean, what is the intention to speak? And when I say it, can it come from a place of kindness? Just a side story for me, I've spoken, and a lot of people in here have spoken quite a bit, but often when there's suffering in the speech, I'll do metta. And I'll also maybe pray with somebody. I'm not Christian, but I believe in prayer. It's like metta to me. Prayer is just like metta to me. I don't find any difference in the two. But what it does is it's coming from the heart. It's less from the sense of self. So speech is an action that if we can learn to see it as infused with loving kindness, then we're just so much more approachable and so much more fun to be around, instead of that. Yes, sir.
I was just going to say, you talked about listening, and I almost wish it was talking about good right speech and right listening, because I think listening is the other side of it, and I think that's very powerful, and I think that's the antidote to the selfing sometimes, and I think that's what you were talking about is so powerful. You can tell. I was a teacher, and I know students could tell. You can tell if somebody is listening to you intently with full attention, or if somebody is listening to you and formulating their response already, which means really not listening to you. So I think listening is so powerful as well as speaking and moving toward that kindness.
Excellent.
Tenfold.
Right.
The tenfold path.
Because I added like people.
Well, but like in a way though, this discernment of is speech beneficial, right? And then this kind of pulling away from having to talk allows enough space. So what we're doing is this is right speech, right action, right livelihood. Okay, so the practicing in that particular way sets us up to be more present for other people. We just don't need to talk as much. Because the sense of self is not as compelling. Isn't this great? I mean, we just take these precepts for granted, and we say at the beginning of retreat, don't steal, don't do intoxicants, don't do sex, and it's much more profound than that. I mean, the suttas are like, they make this discernment about certain types of speech and certain types of actions have harsher karmic consequences. Christianity does not do that. I'm not putting down Christianity, but the truth is, probably, if I slapped my wife tonight, that would be much more painful for me than if I exaggerated the truth to her tonight. Certain actions carry a lot harsher consequences for our psyche, right? I mean, you everybody in here's done something like, oh my God, that's right. And then you've done this other thing where it's like, okay, that wasn't the best, but you wanted to talk?
Yeah, I was just gonna. Gail mentioned it in response to the the waiting, the waiting to respond thing. I found that most of the time, whenever I find myself getting very distracted when speaking with somebody, I do find that I'm not listening. I'm just waiting my turn to have my turn to say what I want to say. And that's where I feel like a lot of arguments really come into play as well. It's like, are you actually listening to one another? Or are you just waiting for your turn to say your side? And putting that pause into play and learning to listen better, I think it's a huge part of the entire course.
And also, though, like Leah's question, well, I can't remember now. It's Leah. Her question had to do with investigation, but see, like when it's like that, right? So you can feel the contraction in the body, right? So instead of looking at it as ooh, bad listener, right, or selfish person, right, saying, oh, this is an opportunity to investigate the sense of self, because what's really happening is the selfing process. The selfing process is so compelling that we want to talk about it, So can I just fall back and pause, right? Pause like you're saying, and then say, what's going on here, right? What's happening here? And typically it's going to be aversion and fear. Typically, it'll be other things, but usually it's aversion and fear.
Desire?
What's that?
Is it not desire?
Well, yeah, but underneath it is probably some sense of greed, like wanting mind, or not wanting mind. Usually that's pretty much the foundation of this, is something like that. But yeah, desire is one of them, absolutely. But when you look a little bit deeper than that, like I want to talk, right? I have a strong craving to talk. Under that may be something like, I better get my turn. I'm gonna get left out, right?
Let's see where aversion or fear would meet desire at that point.
Yeah.
In the intersection.
Yeah, right. We're on the same page. Okay, good. Yeah, great comment. So, investigate it. Investigate a little bit closer. What that's going on there. All right. So,
Sorry, you said selfing process. That's a thing?
Absolutely.
I missed it for a few years.
I know where you been.
Not present.
Selfing about the self.
Thanks, Leah, for sitting straight.
The present, please.
Well, here, usually it's things like, building a sense of self. Well, here's basically in the teachings, like where it comes about, like if the Four Noble Truths, right? There is suffering. What's the cause of suffering, right? Cause of suffering is wanting, craving, and clinging. But and there's three types of wanting. There's a wanting to create a self. There's the annihilation of self. And there's also craving for sensual pleasures. Those are the three types of pleasure. And so, like everybody in here has witnessed that I got to be somebody, right? Like the Donna Summer song. It's a Donna Summer song. I want to be somebody, right? It's what we do. I mean, we want to be somebody because this self view, this identity view, we look at it as a way to essentially belong.
Whitney Houston.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's bothering me.
Thank you, and thanks for saying that. I appreciate you saying that. I like Whitney.
Well, actually, no. I want to dance with somebody.
I know. I was like, that's why I want to dance with somebody.
That's what it is.
I want to be somebody.
I don't
That's
know.
totally different.
There is
I'm
no
like,
such
what song are
thing.
y'all talking?
So anyway, you have this identity view, right? And so most all the suffering comes down to that, is self view. I mean, one sense, one piece of suffering is taking what is not self to be self. Another piece of it is to take what's impermanent to be permanent. But they're all pretty much related to self view, when it comes down to it. Yeah. And also indulgence with sensual pleasures. And even the annihilation of self, like I don't want to be anybody, is still like a self view. Does that make sense? Okay.
I think I was going to say in relation to what David was saying earlier about being in an argument, sometimes it's if the other person is showing a lot of self, then you sort of rise to that base,
Yeah.
I think. It's hard to,
Yeah.
that's when it's really hard to calm down the selfing in yourself.
Well, and what that is, what I think that is, right, is also one of the most difficult defilements of what I understand in the teachings. One of the most difficult defilements to let go of is called conceit, and conceit is basically comparing mind. Because they're all kind of trying to move up the totem pole, right? Or if this person here, this has happened to me. Like this is what some of my self view that I've been working on, like. Somebody has all that, and I get fearful that I don't have that. I mean, in various aspects of my life, right? It's conceit. It's comparing mine. But basically, what it comes down to is my insecurity around not having something. And we're not talking about material stuff. It could be material stuff, but it's more like lots of different things. I see heads shaking. I see people knowing that what I'm talking about. Yeah. So conceit, we do that. You get somebody really strong and forceful, right? And then then we start to feel that there, right? And then we got to ump the ante, right? That's conceit. Yeah. Really painful. All right. Has all experienced pain around this? Yeah, I have. Yeah, it's painful. Yeah. Good. All right. So these precepts or shila is the more we activate these to our value system. This is an individual thing here. Okay, I'm going to say some things, but it's individual. The more what's happening is because we're purifying the mind. This is part of mental purification. There begins to be like more respect for all living things. You see, so then it feeds on itself, right? So the more respect there is for all living things, right? There's more commitment to this shila, this morality piece. There's an own internal loop here. I like to sum them up too. Like really, when I look at these, I'm sitting here thinking like, I've witnessed different teachers. Everybody here's witnessed different teachers talk about this, right? But I really like to look at them like this. Don't take what isn't yours. Don't abstain from taking things that belong to somebody else. Okay, so here they are, right? One is property. Abstain from taking things unless they're freely given, right? And number two, right? Sexuality in Buddhist psychology, adultery is like way up the height and egregious stuff, right? But this woman or man is not freely offered, and so like it's painful for other people. So many people are hurt with this sexual action, right? So many people get wounded by that. Intoxicants. Abstain from harmful behavior related to intoxicants. It doesn't say don't drink or don't whatever you do. Whatever you decide to do. Whatever y'all doing out there. Yeah, whatever y'all doing out there. Just don't harm anybody. All these precepts are about not harming people. So, and thank you. Yeah, that's a big one. I mean, our metta practice, right, is so much about being kind to self, absolutely. So there's that, there's intoxicants, there's sexuality, there's property, there's and there's killing, right? Killing, abstaining from taking the lives of living things, right? Abstain from that.
That just gets complicated.
How?
Taking an antibiotic.
Well,
They probably won't die.
What?
They don't die, do they?
I don't know
Yeah.
that. I'm
Yeah.
not that
They
smart.
just continue on.
It introduces a extinction level event to them. So
The
the
bacteria.
majority of them will die.
Yeah.
A handful will live, and because those handful lived, they were resistant and will now proliferate, which is why we're in a bacteria resistance apocalypse.
Mosquitoes.
Great.
Mosquitoes. How about that? Good.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting question, right? Like, can
It's a great question.
can you blame the
Where do you
mosquito
draw the
for
line?
being a mosquito, right?
No, I really do.
Right.
I sometimes
Yeah.
apologize,
Right.
then I squish it.
Yeah. But
It's like either you or me, and I don't.
Please forgive me.
But I realize that there's an issue here.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear you guys are taking a pause before you slap the
Well-
mosquito.
The pause was for other people to live, right? That's what the pause is for, right?
I'm playing God.
Well,
Or
we're part of
something.
nature, right?
It was what was karmically supposed to happen to
Yeah.
the mosquito.
But see, the beauty of the question is that each one of us are going to be developing in this. So there's not like any Buddhist rule, they're just guidelines. So like I've been on retreat where, there was some kind of critter infestation, right? And everybody had to leave and we couldn't kill any of them, right? I've had that circumstance. And I've had the opposite where there's a critter infestation and they just killed the stuff. So a lot of it depends on the teacher and the environment, et cetera, right? So everybody has to kind of make their own kind of like, how does this help me? And really the practice is such that your awareness of what is right for yourself develops.
Yeah, right. That's the point.
It's a part of that selfing process.
Yeah.
I mean, when you take charge of getting rid of or allowing certain infestations, there's a sense of who you are that helps make that decision.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we talk about the selfing, like here's the thing with that. It's important to have a self, to be able to operate in the world. In the same breath, though, there needs to be some discernment about, like, let me back up and try again, okay? So, like when we do things that go against our values in these precepts, right? Let's say, okay, they go against what we've decided for ourselves. There will be some sense of remorse. It may be subtle, it may be big, right? So that's very important, because what you'll find is the next time you meditate, it might be hard, because you got this thing like, that didn't work for me, right? Go ahead.
So is it a good thing that we draw the hard line and then we feel remorse after we cross it, or
I can't
especially
answer that
if
question.
it's accidental? Like I know
Absolutely.
I feel bad if I accidentally kill something.
Yeah, absolutely. But see, it's to me, it's not bad or good. Okay, there's no judgment in this. Well, remorse is like it just doesn't match your values. There's some sense of this thing doesn't work for my Sheila, right? So and some of that is conditioning with respect to like. You have to discern that too in my condition. So this whole kind of like investigative process around like
I kind of see it as like a path. Like I'm on the
Absolutely.
path to non-harm. So
Absolutely.
I'm trying, but sometimes you harm things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Birds run into your car. But again, that example right there is a faulty example, because remember when we did the speech, it's really about intention and motivation. You see?
I have an urgency to speak.
Yes.
Also, I
Selfing.
think
I see you after class.
a part of this, he said very kindly.
He's a teacher. He means it, right?
Bail it out now.
I bet with you, there's a whole big thing of compassion that happens way before there's an action and a remorse. You're already feeling compassion for the bird, mosquito, or something like that.
Right.
Relating, it's got a family at home, and I just took a. So you probably go
Well,
through.
I'll be honest. I won't purposefully kill a mosquito. Like I'll let it go. I'll be
Yeah.
like, please don't bite me, thank you. Like
Yeah,
I'm not for
yeah,
dinner. I
yeah.
respect you. You respect me. We'll have this conversation. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But like I saw, like out of the I don't know. Like something black was on my hand in the garage, and I like just out of knee jerk,
Instinct.
yeah. And a little mosquito fell to the ground, and I was like, oh. I'm sorry, like it was just a reaction, and that was, another
But you
time-
exercised the compassion.
Yeah.
There was a good.
Like everybody's experienced this before. It's like, you've had some like moment, where maybe you're dishonest. Let's say I had this happen to me recently. It's something that I wasn't being honest, right? And then our initial reaction, because we do care, right, is that, well, I wouldn't have done it if, I would, if only. Yeah, right. All these kinds of things that are really taking the focus off of this, our heart. It's taking the focus off our heart. And so really the answer to the question is self-honesty, which is a discernment. You have to be honest with yourself. Sometimes you need to run it by people, like, Ken and I have coffee, and so he's the kind of person I can say, like, I'm not sure, but, I don't like this thing that I did, right? And what it is, like a mirror, right? It's like a mirror where I can, like, be honest with myself, right? And sometimes I'm not being honest with myself. I'm being deluded. So you got to kind of strive for this, what's the real truth about this, And it's a beautiful process, because in our practice, we don't judge that. We don't judge like, oh, like you're dishonest. So, no, we all dishonest sometimes. We all do it. We exaggerate. We don't tell quite all the details. We leave out certain things, right? And it's because of the selfing process. Because we want so badly to belong, right? That's one aspect of selfing. We need to belong because we operate well in community. That sometimes we just don't tell it all. You know what I mean? So it's okay, and it's okay. It's okay. Who had their hand up? Ken.
I was just going to say, in this whole discussion, one of the things that I find appealing about Buddhism is that it's really self-defined as the middle way, and it's very much unlike some other morality codes in the Abrahamic tradition, especially. It's about nuance. It's about intention. It's about thinking things through the individual rather than a lot of rules that are laid down. But I think with a lot of this, the Buddha was trying to come to a middle way that people could live with. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the Jain religion in India, which it was coming about the same time that Buddhism was, and it's still there in India. And the people who are most extreme about that, it's completely extreme about non-harm. They used to not wear clothes and have people sweeping the ground in front of them so that they wouldn't accidentally step on something, that kind of thing. So that, I think, is an extreme that Buddha said we don't need to do that, just like we don't need to go to the sensual extravagance of his early life when he was a prince and all of that. So I think, I don't know, to me it always feels like we can be a little bit gentle with ourselves in some of these things, and think about intention, and think about being on the path, and think about moving forward without beating ourselves up.
And it leads us to the potential of wise speech and wise action, because there are 12 of us in this room, 13 of us in this room, and many of us have had something to say about the mosquitoes and all of this. But we've all thought about it at different times when we have killed something, and we've killed something accidentally, we've killed something intentionally, and the Buddhist approach allows that to be fodder for thinking and sharing, and it opens up that possibility.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned earlier that, a goal is just to see if somehow we can make this a little bit better place to live. And there's chuckling and there's sarcasm in this talking about mosquitoes and all of that, without any question. But if all 7.5 billion people on this planet had the same conversation we had tonight, it would be a better place to live.
Yeah. So, thanks, Ben. So I asked Ben to read. I found something interesting on the internet. I found these Dhammapada stories, and some of you know what the Dhammapada is, right? It's these series of quotes by the Buddha, right? They're very nice, succinct quotes. If you haven't seen the Dhammapada, it can be really inspirational. So I found that there's a lot of stories that go along with these verses. So I found one for Ben. Ben agreed to read this one. Would you do that?
I shall.
Thank you.
This is called The Cruel Butcher. Maybe fitting from our
And there's a scripture at the end.
There is a scripture at the end. I was going to ask
scripture.
Do I read that at the
end?
end?
Go ahead and read that.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead and read, and then read the scripture. Yeah.
There once was a butcher who was a very mean and wicked man. Never in his life had he ever done any meritorious deeds. His job was slaughtering pigs, and he loved it, often torturing them mercilessly before putting them to death. One day he got very sick and finally died, but before he died, he suffered such agony that he crawled around on his hands and his knees for days, squealing and grunting like a pig being slaughtered. It so happened that the butcher's house was within ear's reach of the monastery where the Buddha and his monks were staying. When the bhikkhus heard the desperate squeals coming from his house, they assumed that the miserable butcher was at his cruel work again and shook their heads in great disapproval. The squeals and the grunts went on for several days until one day they stopped, just as suddenly as they had begun. The monks could not help but remark to each other how wicked and hard-hearted the butcher was for having caused his poor animals so much pain and suffering. The Buddha overheard what they were saying, and he said, "Bhikkhus, the butcher was not slaughtering his pigs. He was very ill and in such great pain that he was acting like the pigs he used to enjoy inflicting pain upon. His bad karma had finally caught up with him. Today he died and was reborn in a woeful state of existence." The Buddha then exhorted his disciples to be alert at doing good, for anyone who did evil deeds would have to suffer for them. There was no way to escape from one's evil deeds, he warned his disciples. That's the end of the story. And the scripture is, "Here he grieves, hereafter he grieves. The evildoer grieves in both existences. He grieves and he suffers anguish when he remembers his impure deeds."
Thank you. Last 2 minutes of our group tonight. So Roxy and I, Roxy's going to be here next week, and what we talked about was we're going to have, with Right Livelihood, we're going to have a discussion. It's going to be open forum discussion. I won't be here. Roxy will teach. I don't know how much she wants to teach, but then I think she'll open it up because a lot of your asking questions about, action, right, in a community as far as a practitioner, right? And we want to, I might actually be able to be here, but I'm really interested in what people are doing because I know a lot of y'all are doing a lot of things out there. And I also think it's really good for our group to know that there's a lot of people in here that put a lot of heart into making the community a better place. We don't just sit on a cushion. This is about bringing the practice out into the world and making it a better place. So, it's up to Roxy. We're going to have this kind of forum that we do. And it may last into the next one because of this livelihood is more than just, it often gets taught as what's your vocation. I think it's better to look at it as all aspects of your living. Every aspect of how you live your life is right livelihood. So I'm gonna do something a little bit different tonight. In closing, how would you like or feel about maybe just a minute or two of metta practice? And just a suggestion, that you can do to make your metta practice kind of go is just maybe bring to mind an image of somebody that you feel safe and loved by. Close your eyes and bring that image to mind, and just kind of be with that image in your heart. Be with that image in your heart. And after you do that for a moment or two or a minute, and then just wish yourself well and wish perhaps that person in the image well, and whoever you like, just wish them well. People in the room. safe.
Nice.
Be safe.
Thank you, Andy.
Good.
Thank you. Thanks, Ben. Everybody be safe.